Wow.
Josiah,
What
you,
were we
yes.
doing? Yeah. Yeah. So Nick, William and I have been working together for probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before Hodmedods got going. And we've been working for a little non-governmental organisation looking at food systems called East Anglia Food Link. And we did work with farmers, with DEFRA, with local community groups. And really, Hodmedod grew out of a community group that came to us and said, what if our city, what if Norwich, what if we grew all our own food? How would that work? How would that change diets? How would that change land use? And we thought that was a fantastic question. I mean, not something to aspire to because it'd be incredibly difficult, but a really interesting thought experiment, which perhaps has been brought into even sharper focus with Brexit, where maybe we do need to grow a lot more of our own food. And we did a kind of a lab, a tabletop experiment. We looked at what was being grown where and what could be grown that wasn't being grown. And there were some straightforward things. Meat and dairy actually are relatively straightforward to get relocalized because they already are quite relocalized. We've still got, not many, but we've still got some local abattoirs and things like that. And cereals, wheat, it's not too difficult to redirect wheat that's being grown into a local mill and then make a local loaf out of it. And we worked with a baker to produce something that we called the Norwich loaf, which was made with wheat from a farm on the edge of the city, milled in the city and baked in the city. And horticulture, all cities would have had that ring of market gardens around them that would have supplied the restaurants and the market and the households. And recreating a bit of that was relatively straightforward. But the thing that really interested us was this idea that in this new model where we're growing more and eating more produce that's grown around the city, we need to be thinking about vegetable proteins, beans and peas and other crops like that, partly because they're good, for our diet. They're very useful in terms of land use. They use less land than a lot of other crops, but also because they're really nutritious and because they fix nitrogen. They do these amazing things of capturing their own fertilizer from the soil. And when we started looking at that, we realized that there were these crops like fava beans, like these split beans here, that are being grown in the UK, have been for 2,000 years. And yet we do not eat them anymore. For 400 years, they've just been seen as poor people's food. We feed them to animals. And more recently, we started exporting them to countries that still love them. The Mediterranean, North Africa, where there are dishes like fulmedames and tamea and all sorts of things like that. And so really, we just started by getting those back into people's kitchens, getting them experimenting with them. We sent out little packs, not dissimilar to this, which had a postage paid postcard in them. And we just painted by a friend of ours, beautifully illustrated. And we just asked people, would you cook these? Would you eat them? What do you think? Send us a postcard. And we weren't sure whether we'd hear anything, but we were absolutely inundated. And when the community project came to an end, and none of the people that were involved in that project were particularly interested in carrying forward the beans, they carried forward the bread and the vegetables, we just decided that it was something we needed to do. And that's really where it came from. And we kind of went from it being a little part-time, interesting aside to very quickly dominating our lives, frankly. I think, Nick, it dominated your life quicker than it dominated mine, but it got us all in the end.
It certainly did, yeah. We created a monster.
What I love is the fact that you were. I mean, farmers were already exporting something like 250,000 tons of beans to North Africa, Middle East, Egypt, etc. And we were just quietly getting on with it. No one was really aware of it, that we were, rather than importing, we were exporting, and it was all about quality because people wanted them to be of a certain quality. Nick, they insisted upon that.
I mean, the Middle Eastern market, and particularly Egypt, which, as Josiah said, is the main export market for British fava beans, they're very demanding. So they do demand very high quality beans, and that's what farmers were growing, and that's the market they were serving, with the lower quality beans going for animal feed. Anything from salmon to cattle can be fed on fava beans. And when it struck us that these beans were being grown here and had been grown here for hundreds, even thousands of years, and we weren't eating them, we initially just thought there must be something wrong with these beans, they must be revolting. And then we got hold of some and tried them ourselves and realized that they're fantastically versatile and tasty, and you can make those Middle Eastern dishes that Josiah mentioned, but you can also use them for there's lots of Italian dishes, sort of fava with chicory, and mash them up with potatoes, or you can use them for a sort of medieval pottage, or make an Asian Dahl with them, and they really are fantastic. And yeah, we just couldn't believe that we were growing this crop and not eating it. And since launching the split beans and the whole beans, which were our first products, we've realized there are a whole load of other things you can do with these beans. You can mill them to make a flour. It's an incredibly versatile, naturally gluten-free flour. You can roast them to make a sort of ready-to-eat snack like Spanish habas fritas. You can even ferment them. We now work with a fermenter in Wales who creates this fantastically potent and rich fermented fava bean paste. We call it an umami paste because it just knocks you out with sort of deep, rich umami flavors.
Yeah, I actually I haven't made any beer out of them. That would be quite an interesting, because obviously people think about hops, but that's a relative newcomer into the brewing world. I would think an experimental brewer would come up with something really interesting.
They have actually. There's a brewer up in Scotland called Barney's who has made some beer out of them, and I think is looking to do more with that. But we've tried some of it, and it's really good stuff.
Okay, I'm writing that one down. Barney's in Scotland. Okay, just for awful work, of course.